Former President Jacob Zuma's corruption case is back in the Pietermaritzburg High Court today, but not for the start of his arms deal corruption trial. He wants the decision which dismissed his attempt to have lead prosecutor Duma recuse himself overturned. Now, last October, Judge Piet Koen ruled that the allegations of bias and prejudice against Duma could be dealt with during the trial. Newzroom Afrika's senior politics reporters Ziyanda Ngcobo and Nkosikhona Duma are both outside court for us this morning at different vantage points. Nkosikhona Duma, let's begin with you. Give us a sense of the mood outside court there today. We now know that the former president will be at this court appearance. Have people started to gather there?
Well, Michelle, I'm actually at the vantage point at the entrance of this particular court, and already there's a sweep that's been conducted by authorities in anticipation for the arrival of former President Jacob Zuma this morning. Of course, we know that inside the court is where that legal showdown will be taking place, and his lawyers are going to be arguing then that this court erred in not granting him that application to have Duma recuse himself, because they believe that fundamentally he does not have a title to prosecute in this matter because of the allegations of political or interference and prejudice that Duma has in this matter, that he lacks impartiality that a prosecutor would need then to be able to oversee this matter. They've cited him deposing an affidavit in the DA's court case which sought to overturn the decision not to prosecute against the former president. But also, they're saying that Judge Piet Koen looked at a very narrow definition of the title to prosecute, and saying that he should have extended and broadened his scope when looking at this matter. So saying basically making similar arguments to say, well, when you look at Section 101H of the Criminal Procedures Act, they should have been granted as well that special plea for Duma to actually recuse himself, because going into the trial, which Michelle was initially set down for the 11th of April, they need to have a prosecution's team that is free and fair of any kind of, aspersions or doubts from their side. But of course, you'll recall, Michelle, that Judge Piet Koen said these issues don't necessarily mean that the former president's rights, according to Section 35 of the Constitution, that he wouldn't have a fair trial. And so these are the arguments that are expected to be made. Another issue, Michelle, that's likely to come out this morning is the fact that the state deposed a responding affidavit to this, and the former president's lawyers are saying, well, it's unusual procedurally so that in an application for leave to appeal that the state has been asked to file an answering or responding affidavit. So those are some of the issues then that will be raised in this court this morning.
Ziyanda, where does all of this fit into the trial itself? We know that the former president and his legal team have been accused of using stalling, delaying tactics so that the trial, is delayed more and more. It was meant to get underway. There have been several false starts. Where are we now with the corruption trial itself?
Well, the trial has been set down to start on the 11th of April, but if the former president is not granted leave to appeal, perhaps he could also still seek recourse then, at the Supreme Court of Appeal and the Constitutional Court. So the trial itself, the actual corruption trial, dealing then with evidence being led regarding that arms deal, cannot go ahead until this issue then of whether or not Duma will lead the prosecution's team has been dealt with. The former president, through his foundation spokesperson, Mzwanele Manyi, telling me yesterday that it's unfair to describe this as an escalation of the Stalingrad tactic, which would be delaying this matter, because he has every right to seek recourse if he feels that an injustice has been taken against him, to have Duma, who they say, on numerous occasions has proven to lack the kind of impartiality that is needed by a prosecutor to oversee this matter, and that there's been political interference to oversee this matter, that he has no right to oversee this particular trial. But again, Michelle, there's also a Supreme Court of Appeal ruling that says even if there has been political interference in a matter, if there's enough evidence that can be laid before the court to prove then the nature of the charges, then that particular matter must get underway. And so this is why, if you recall, that permanent stay of prosecution application was denied. Then they brought up the issue of Billy Downer leading this particular prosecution. And so yet again, we're still dealing with the matter of whether or not Billy Downer should actually oversee this matter.
Well, thanks very much indeed for some of that legal perspective on the story. Let's stay there at the High Court in Pietermaritzburg. Take you now to Nkosikhona Duma. He's tracking some of the activity a little further away from the entrance to the court. Nkosikhona, we now know that the former president himself will be in court this morning. How has that affected the number of people showing up there today?
Well, Michelle, I'll tell you this. There's fewer than usual supporters of former President Jacob Zuma gathered here outside the Pietermaritzburg High Court. What we usually have seen with these court appearances is that there would be a stage that would be set up, that there would be a night vigil. But if I stayed over short, you'll see that quite a few people have started gathering so far. But we have Mr. Carl Niehaus, who perhaps can shed light with that. He's our guest here this morning on Newzroom Afrika. Mr. Niehaus, what we are seeing out of court here is fewer than usual people. You have been previously one of the people who have been mobilizing supporters for former President Jacob Zuma. I mean, what do you make of this?
I make absolutely nothing of the fact that there are not as many supporters as you may want to see here. I know that people are coming, and I also know that the expression of support from President Zuma is not only on the basis of the people who are present here, but the support that he gets throughout the country. I still continue to maintain that President Zuma is the most popular politician in South Africa. You must remember that this court case has now been dragging on for over 22 years. You know, I said to someone as I got out of the car this morning, I've got deja vu. It was more than 22 years ago that for the first time I came to this very same court where President Zuma was appearing. You will remember that it then went to Durban, now it's back in Pietermaritzburg. I'm sure my beard was then far darker and not as grey as it is now. But that indicates to us the manner in which this issue has been dragged on, how there has not been a proper case presented. The NPA continues to fail to prove anything in terms of this case. We continue to believe that President Zuma is here on trumped-up charges, that it is for political reasons, that he is here as the champion of radical economic transformation, and that this is not a prosecution, but it is a persecution. Today is an appeal. We hope that at the end of this appeal, and when finally there's an outcome, that we will get President Zuma to be able to go home, to rest, to be the elderly statesman that we respect. Give him the chance to be himself and to stop the persecution that is being run against him. I saw yesterday a very interesting short video of someone in the street in one of our townships washing some clothes. And he said, "Hey, can't you just leave our old man alone?" And then he said, if this must continue, why don't you just arrest Cyril Ramaphosa?
Well, Mr. Niehaus, I mean, we are getting confirmation, of course, that the former president will indeed be arriving. We saw members of his VIP protection services also gathered in court. Should we expect him to address his supporters as he has previously done in the past?
President Zuma will attend the court hearing. That is quite correct. The issue of addressing supporters is not important. The issue of the supporters being here to give their support for President Zuma is the matter. So President Zuma will, from his perspective, of course, convey a message, whether he addresses them or whether he addresses them through us who are here as people who are supporting him. he will convey a message of gratefulness for the continuing support that he has received from so many South Africans who care dearly about him.
Mr. Niehaus, I would say that there appears to be less interest, at least in comparison to the previous court appearances with this. We see even less members of the media. In fact, there's even less police presence around this particular court. I'm sure you're seeing that. Again, I put it to you, there's even less supporters of former President Jacob Zuma. I mean, what has happened to this man who would mobilize people simply by just announcing where he would be, and thousands of people would swarm around him? It appears that people who would accompany you to these court appearances are no longer here. What has changed?
Nothing has changed. And in fact, the narrative that you are trying to push is a fake and false narrative. President Zuma continues to get support throughout the country. You must understand that when President Zuma appears in court, it is not just those who come to this park or across the road to support him, but also those who support him throughout the country. The supporters of President Zuma, the majority of people in the African National Congress, have suffered severely because of the COVID-19 pandemic and because of the mismanagement by our government of the resources that were available to assist the poor. So obviously, there will be less resources available for the poor to mobilize to come and show their support. And that is the issue you must ask yourself. Why are people battling to have resources to give expression to their support for President Zuma, not trying to run a narrative that President Zuma doesn't have support? This government, this ANC leadership of now, have destroyed the financial base of the majority of people in this country. They should be asked the question, why are the majority of South Africans suffering in the manner that they do?
Yes. Okay, Mr. Niehaus, we are unfortunately running out of time, but thank you so much for joining us. Well, that was Mr. Carl Niehaus saying that, the reason why there appears to be less supporters outside court for former President Jacob Zuma is because of less funding. He's, of course, just lashed out at the current leadership of the African National Congress, saying that they are the ones responsible for draining the funds, which have then prevented poor people from gathering outside this particular courtroom. He insists that the former president remains popular and will indeed be participating at today's court proceedings.
Nkosikhona, thanks very much indeed. Live to us there outside the Pietermaritzburg High Court.